was to trigger emotions.
There are some moral choices at some points.
And as the audience, we can only watch passively the consequences of his decisions.
And we saw a lot of people playing together as a couple, sometimes with a man or the woman holding the controller, but both enjoying the experience as if they were watching a TV show together.
Sure.
And except you can change what's going on.
Look, I didn't start the series to go dumpster diving for games, like an over-opinionated, neck-bearded raccoon. But somehow, the further I dig into the cageography, the more sandwiches covered in cat piss I seem to find. In less words, it's been a eye-opening experience indeed, if that I was goatsy.cx. This is an appropriate reference, because a horrendous photo of a man pulling his rusty cage open that you would send to your mates as a joke is a perfect metaphor for this game. Sadly, that rush of seeing a friend repel in disgust is replaced by some of the most depressing imagery I have ever seen, and not the way the man behind this artistic shitfit intended. And I know I'm hitting the bad game gong very early, but there isn't anything positive to say here. And the bits of praise I have for Beyond Two Souls feel like they're good by accident. And to be clear, I'm not here to drag Quantic Dream. What they can do on a technical level is stunning. So the complaints in this video are solely on the story aspect, and we know who is the culprit. And I can already feel the bile rising in my throat. And lastly, before we get into this, I will be spoiling the shit out of this game. So if you want to play it before I... play the game. In an interview with James Gallagher back in 2012 for the official PlayStation blog, our bringer of narrative doom commented on the landscape of games at the time. You see, in his view,
if this industry wants to mature and evolve, then we need to talk about emotions and work on stories that appeal to all people, not just hardcore gamers between the ages of 15 and 17. We have a much wider market out there just waiting to interact if we can go to them with the right ideas.
Also, I'd like to highlight this comment that Cage goes on to say, in perfect text-to-speech,
no good stories are written by 50 people. A story is something emotional, personal, that you want to share, and it is strongly linked to your own life and experiences.
I would also like to note that this interview was done a year before Beyond was released. So while he isn't referencing what he's about to unleash, get ready to see him gloriously contradict this statement. And then he goes on to say,
we need auteurs, and the biggest problem in this industry is that we don't trust them. Auteurs are scary, because they come back with ideas, but that is exactly what this industry should be about. Hello human, I am also a fellow human.
While it sounds like our favourite auteur director is an old man yelling at monster-soaked clouds, and it is, I do mostly agree with him, which must be a fucking first. In an industry, God, every time I say that I feel like I should be wearing fucking Joker makeup. In a society, whatever. In an industry where mainstream games are just getting bigger and demanding bigger teams to create, there are numerous examples of games and stories being written by committee. And while most examples can get away with this monkeys with typewriters mentality, most of them just sound absolutely soulless and feel like they've been written for the lowest common denominator. Shout out to Borderlands 3. And while I personally prefer the singular or small team when it comes to writing in games, you need to be incredibly careful and self-aware of what you're saying, because you have fewer people to bounce these ideas from, and if the said idea is stupid, you're gonna look like a fucking chump. Take Hideo Kojima as an example. Yes, he has created some of the most compelling worlds in gaming, and has been doing it longer than the auteur in question. But when you line up all his games, arguably his best work was when he had a team of writers around him to mould, shape and filter all these ideas into a coherent narrative. Metal Gear Solid 2 and Metal Gear Solid 3 are perfect examples of these types of collaborations, and they've been regarded as a high watermark for exceptional writing, theming, and resonating with an audience far beyond its release date. Contrast this with Metal Gear Solid 4 and 5, and while these two games still had that creative spark, it lacked the filter, and Unfiltered Kojima is a mood unto itself.
You like Suikoden?
Nope. A perfect example of this trailer 4 is the boss from Metal Gear Solid 3. The boss is a leader of a special forces unit tasked to take on the most critical of missions, for the good old United States. She is also the mother figure for Snake, who looks up to her even when she turns her back on him and her country. In any lesser game, especially the ones later in the series, the boss would have been just another villain to overcome in a display of jingoistic glory. However, throughout the story, we find out why she turned on her country and her protege, and it's fucking heartbreaking. And that is completely down to Kojima and his team putting on a masterclass of toying with the expectations of the player, and made what could have been a by-the-numbers villain into something more. And then look at Quiet in Metal Gear Solid 5, and while she does have a reason to be half naked, when she's waving her ass in front of my face, I am not thinking there is an ulterior motive for her to be doing that. I just question if Kojima needs to hydrate on something else, rather than a near-mute blow-up doll with daddy issues. What the fuck is Metal Gear Survive? And you're probably asking another important question. Why the fuck am I talking about Metal Gear Solid? Isn't this supposed to be a rant about some serious art for once? And I can't even say that with a fucking straight face. However, this tirade is here for a reason. While good Kojima is some of the best storytelling in gaming, it is the exact polar opposite of the person we're going to be talking about again today. And before we move on to the very first chapter of this fucking long video, I would like to highlight DC's comment that we don't trust auteurs, because it's fucking hilarious. And I'm sure that joke will wear itself thin by the end of this video. Chapter 1. Ghost Tales. Just like in the Heavy Rain review, if you haven't seen it already, please check it out. I won't be doing a blow-to-blow account of the plot, because there isn't one for the majority of this fecking game. Spoiler alert. And the funny thing is, if you read the synopsis on Wikipedia, the plot looks theoretically interesting.
Too long, didn't read. Too long, didn't read it.
Mostly due to the person who wrote that passage is a fucking wordsmith. So if you get confused, it's not my fault. It's down to David Cage doing what he does best, which is a nice way of saying he pukes on a Microsoft Word document and then gets Mr. Clippy to arrange it in the dumbest way possible. Alright, we start off beyond... fuck me, saying this title is like a bukkake party for the vocal cords. We start off beyond wordy wank wank with our lead protagonist Jodie Holmes, played by actor Elliot Page, regurgitating quotes from Jaden Smith's Twitter account like it's some profound crap that isn't a load of dissociated drivel. Meanwhile, in the actual intro, we see Jodie being interviewed by a police officer who found her drifting in the middle of nowhere, but our heroine sandbags him by the power of being dead inside, my kind of woman. This scene is quickly broken by the point man from Fear, busting in with a bunch of armoured buddies to arrest Jodie. Hey, first question, why would a SWAT team raid a police department? You would think they would be on the same page, right? Oh, sorry, I forgot. I'm playing a David Cage game where logic goes to fucking die. Anyway, ignore that because a man in a sharp suit, who's also on the hunt for Jodie, arrives to find that point man and his crew have been killed. Oh look, it's Hollywood actor William Dafoe, who looks like his underbite was stapled to his forehead. Clap everyone, fucking clap! And then we jump to another time where Jodie and her partner Ryan, who is a complete asshole, is on a mission to infiltrate this fancy dinner party and do some spy shit, I guess. And we also soon discover the first personality trait of our avatar, which is incessant complaining.
I feel like everyone's looking at us.
That's not just a feeling, everyone is looking at us.
This dress sucks. I knew I should have worn something else. So do you want me to act natural or do you want me to smile?
Oh my God! Shut the fuck up!
Also, and more interesting, Jodie has ghost powers that she can use to hack stuff and... sorry, I've got a nosebleed. I know DC most of the time has no concept in world building, but this rapid fire display of telling the player fuck all is a lot to take in. So, Cage, slow down and give us an idea of what the balls is going on. What is the connecting thread between all these little vignettes, apart from the nothing we established earlier? You see, Beyond Good Pacing's plot is structured in a non-linear way, where we follow Jodie through 17 years of her life growing up on a government black site. You know, the wholesome American upbringing. And the reason why she's at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters is that she has a ghostly entity called Aiden attached to her, which grants our lead with various Deus Ex Machinas. In this story, we flip-flop between Jodie's a kid, living with Casper the friendly plot contrivance, and Jodie frothing over boys that have the personalities of the Paul brothers, while being trained to become a CIA spook. Sorry, being forced to train as a whiny version of Sam Fisher because she has zero autonomy throughout the whole story. Also, this early sequence is a sneaky way to shove in a tutorial where we are treated to the cover-based stealth mechanics. I know, holy shit! David Cage is going to treat us like a gamer this time, and not some lobotomized twat with 10 pegs for funds. Yeah, dream on, fucko. And I want to show you this sizzling character moment at the end of this scene, where Jodie's main squeeze, the ever so lovable Ryan, puts a gun to her head and says some manly bullshit.
Not bad, Jodie. But if this wasn't an exercise, you'd be dead by now.
If this wasn't an exercise, you wouldn't even be able to open your big mouth, Ryan.
Oh man, that romantic tension is so thick you could taste it. Speaking of shit, this whole Tarantino-style non-linear story structure makes no sense, and it screams of David Cage trying to put a pseudo-intellectual spin on this very linear story. So much so, when the game got re-released on the PS4 and the PC, it also comes with a mode where you can play the game in chronological order, which then highlights why the story was structured in this manner in the first place. Because flipping between these two timelines at this rapid pace, for one, do not complement each other, and two, they are polar opposites in terms of theme. One is big and loud, and the other is cute yet benign, which, in a well-paced piece of media, the quiet would complement the bombastic. While you can have a story that doesn't rely on adrenaline-filled conveyance, we know for a fact that our Lord and Saviour of narrative design isn't the Master Chief he believes he is. And in his hubris, he does, well, honestly, what do you think he does? He does absolutely fuck all. I can't help it. David Cage puts me in this mood. I'm trying to be cordial, I'm trying to be analytical, and try to avoid this angry gamer bullshit, but Sorry. What makes this non-linear structure maddening is we as the player have to keep track of what, where and when at all times, because the narrative has not been written in a way where it complements our attention span, or presented in a way that can be easily followed, which compounds another issue that most of these scenes, especially from Jodie's childhood, have no influence over the story. So this use of a meta-narrative framing to tell this said story is absolutely meaningless. So, to try and mask that this story has no plot, DC has mixed up the order of the scenes to stop you from getting bored. In less words, the opening is front-loaded to all fuck, the middle is padded like the writer's pompous nature, and the ending, oh yeah, we will get to that in time. It's a lot of, I've got nothing. Shit. And while we're bitching about the structure, once again our scholar of the scatological has forgotten one of the main rules of effective character building. That is, writing a story at the most interesting time of our protagonist. While the marketing states that this story covers 15 years of Jodie's life, even though it's actually 17 years, if you know how to fucking count, the actual interesting part of her life could be boiled down to 6 to 12 months. Or in raw playtime, about 3 to 4 hours. And that is being generous, given the average playtime of Beyond Testing My Fucking Patience is around 11 to 12 hours long. meaning we spend around 6 to 7 of these watching Jodie grow up and go through more phases in the entire video game industry, which in their own contained moments are fine if this game was say episodic, but going through the whole story as Cage intended in this Tarantino-esque affair is an endurance test, made even more annoying because for most of the game, Jodie is the protagonist but she lacks a personal motivation, or any goals in general. And DC is not interested in giving her a carrot on a stick. That isn't contrived. Well, until the methadone wears off and he realises that he's been typing in fucking wingdings for the last 6 hours. So the main ebb and flow of this entire game, we are just spinning around in this miasma of teen drama without a through line to move the story forward. And while I can give David credit for going with this non-linear story and go through Jodie's life in painstaking detail, it's still incomprehensible to the average gamer due to his writing.
Oh, the irony! It's too much!
Chapter 2. Not like the other girls. As we are in this oasis of praising the prince of pen-shaped penises, sort of, one of the best moves that DC made during the production of this game was hiring Elliot Page to play the lead, because he is a charming performer with a long line of entertaining work, and more importantly has the chops to pull off a decent performances with shit scripts. Also, moaning about his likeness being ripped off in The Last of Us, which in hindsight just sounds like a pallet of sour grapes. One of the reasons why I struggled to relate to Jodie was due to how this game structured its relationship between itself and the player, is because DC once again wants to make a film rather than an interactive experience. Ergo, you are a passive consumer of this story. Yes, you may push the game forward by using a lump of plastic between your greasy palms, but that is as far as the connection goes between you and David Cage's brand new love pillow. This passivity means that Jodie as a playable avatar is externalized from the player, which is not normal but has worked in the past. The reason why she doesn't work as a relatable character is because she is so one-dimensional and a full-on, uncut, MTV fucking unplugged Mary Sue. Or Nathan Drake if you hate the gendering of an overpowered holier-now character that has no opposing problems or human personality traits, and both coincidentally like murdering minorities. However, in beyond character building, all that Jodie does is cry like a burst water pipe, moan about shit like a conceited dingbat, or kick so much ass it puts the Doomslayer to shame. And while she has a few charming moments, mostly due to the actor portraying her, Jodie's character is put on the pedestal so high, it's hard for us to buy into her struggle whenever one is presented, because she is invincible. Even with this contentious discourse and the toxic gender bullshit, Jodie's sooness can be applied to her because her character is too perfect. Everything is handed to her on a silver platter. Nothing is earned, nothing is gained, and coupled with her powers, she has no need to complain about anything. But she does it all the damn time. And furthermore, David Cage has warped the entire world around Jodie, so every character and every story beat bends to her will. She is the center of this universe, and if she no longer existed, the universe would disappear with her. Which leads to Jodie being a very boring character. And no matter how much trauma that's in her life, we know she will never learn or grow. Because, and say it with me, she is invincible. And instead of circumventing this trope, our esteemed writer, like everything he writes, decided to embrace this, and then ironically couldn't find a way to tame the monster he created himself. And what I find even more infuriating is that he is incredibly lazy in finding interesting ways for her to overcome these said challenges. Oh no, Jodie's injured and surrounded by militia that is kicking down the door to kill her. Ah, no biggie. Let the ghost of JC Denton heal her wounds so she can escape without consequence. Oh shit, Jodie is trapped in a burning building with a pregnant lady. What are we going to do? Oh, never mind. She can use her impenetrable shield of bullshit to get through anything because DC's OC has to get through everything with unsatisfying ease. So if Jodie isn't being challenged, it is boring for the people trying to watch her cheat her way out of every situation. And with no satisfaction, all you have is a void. which is 11 hours long, and it's fun. I love it. It's a 10 out of 10 from IGN, and I would happily sodomize myself with a DVD copy of Man of Steel, in awe of its greatness. And before you do it, I know some chinfuck will say that Jodie does not have control of her powers. It's Aiden that does all this stuff on his own accord. And okay, fair enough. The problem is that I don't think DC got that memo, because there are so many times where Jodie flips her powers on without question. So you might want to remind him, rather than leave a comment that reads like a rant typed on a fucking Etch-a-Sketch. Man, I'm so salty today. And if you need some more cringe on your croissant, get it because he's French. Ha 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 ha. There's a scene in his game called Like Other Girls, where Jodie has a temper tantrum because Dr. Daddy says no to her going out with her friends. Also, Jodie is goth for some fucking reason. Anyway, I just wanted to highlight this.
How come everyone can go and I can't? I do everything you ask of me all week, and I never get to have any fun!
For the 100th time, you're not like everyone else, and there are rules.
Well, I didn't ask to be different. I just want to go out and have friends and be like other girls my age.
You'll never be like them. You need to get used to that. Good night.
Ah!
Are you sure that's the keeper?
Ah!
Would you like to take another take?
Ah!
No?
Ah!
Okay.
Ah!
The voice of the downtrodden.
Ah!
The rebel yell.
Ah! Ah! Ah!
Wait. I have another one. The voice of a generation.
Ah!
Oh, fuck me. But that is just the tip of this glorious display of stupidity. Now, it's time to talk about Jodie and her little trip to Somalia. Chapter 3, Call of Jodie, K-Jobs. Or Twattlefield, I don't know, I'm just trying to make an amusing name for this chapter. Oh wait, I got another one. Fuck up the line. Shit.
You know, very often when you write a game about a hero in the Second World War, you don't have a clue about what it feels to be a hero during a war because you never lived that. When you write about a guy saving a country from zombies, you don't have a clue what it feels like because you've never done that.
Oh, so that's why we are killing minorities while dressed like Daddy's little insurgent. While this interview, just like the one we cited earlier, was done before the release of Beyond Two Souls, I find it interesting that good old DC bent the rules to tell his deeply emotional story from his own experience. Come on, we all know that's bullshit. He is the Tom Clancy of contradictions. Anyway, Jodie is tasked to go to Somalia to take out some kind of war chief that is threatening America because America, fuck yeah, I don't know. But you do get to use that stealth training you probably forgot how to use by the time you get to use it. Why? Because this level takes place 8 hours into the game. Jesus, the pace of this fucking thing is like a porn film without the sex. While I shouldn't complain because we get to finally play the game, and pressing X to strangle dudes is spicy, if honestly a needless sequence, I can't shake off this feeling that should have been a QuickTime event, because this level is only here to compete with the big boys, which is kind of funny in respect that he always talks about the spunk guggle wee wee, but it seems like he wants to drink it under the table. In that regard, I'll just let him write a Call of Duty game. Can't be any worse than the shit he puts out now, and it also feels like it drags on forever. And what amplifies this feeling is the clunky controls. It feels like I'm playing Gears of War with a controller made out of concrete. And get this, in the bonus features you can unlock a behind the scenes video where they go in depth on the gameplay. And I love this part.
During the process of this production, we made what we call user tests.
You just watch people playing and you see where they succeed, where they fail.
If a player don't get it right, it's only our fault. So we work very hard to be able to correct it and give the best experience possible.
After each user test, it's meeting after meeting just to find the good solution to every single issue the player may have had.
Yes, David Cage and his little team want you to believe that he invented playtesting, a well-known establishment in the gaming industry for like 30 fucking years. This game is polished to such a mirror shine you can see the bullshit. Alright, I'm being hyperbolic, this sounds more like a featurette for people who've never played a game before, but still, it's bollocks. And swinging back to this level, what makes it so uncomfortable to witness is Cage tries to crowbar some social commentary, such as when Jodie finds out that child soldiers are a thing. War is hell. And later on when our heroine finds out the supposed war chief is an elected politician that she was duped into killing because America is evil, I guess? Actually, editor, can you just put in that Ace Ventura clip again? War is hell. Thank you. Okay, Cage, slow down. These sophomoric political hot takes could set a swimming pool on fire, but at least this is where a fucking motivation for this cocking story begins, as Jodie, on hearing this news, decides to run away from the CIA. Honestly, I'm just glad that we have a connecting thread to drive this story forward. Shame it took David Cage 80 bloody years to get to the fucking point. And this is followed by two other scenes where Jodie becomes a bum, and we'll swing around to that later, and a scene where Jodie ends up on a Native American reservation. And if you thought David Cage struggled with conventional storytelling, get ready to see some flagrant racist shit. Alright, so we catch up with Jodie, who ends up drifting in the desert and finds a farm in the middle of nowhere, owned by Paul and his family. After the most intense meal known to man, Jodie finds out that something is wrong with this place. Perhaps there's another scene that goes fucking nowhere. After the family dodges all of Jodie's questions, she finds out there is an entity that is tormenting the family, that was summoned by their ancestors to drive out the White Devil during the Civil War. And this beastie torments the family every single night who are powerless to fight it. So here comes the white saviour on a pearly steed to swoop in to save the tribe. Oh dear. It's yes another example of David Cage ploughing through a problematic part like a fucking drunk driver. With that said, I kind of liked this level. Now, don't quote me wrong here. I don't like the ineptitude of DC's handling of culture that he has no experience with. No, I mean if you took this scene and gave it a rewrite or 5, it could have been a cool idea, where Jodie travels to different places to bust ghosts with a satisfying payoff, which you can guess are few and far between in this 11-hour yawn printed on a fucking Blu-ray disc. Chapter 4, Misery Porn. While on the run from the CIA, Jodie finds out that her family she had as a kid were government agents tasked in fostering her. And no, this shit doesn't matter, but there's so much stuff to unpack, I can't throw away the suitcase. And her real mum, Nora, who is a gifted individual herself, was put into a coma after Jodie's birth and put in hiding for 24 years. Anyway, Jodie manages to sneak her way into the mental hospital where her catatonic mother is held. Basically, Jodie and Nora have a chinwag, and because she's been in a vegetative state for so long, there is no way she can leave. And then you get given the choice to leave her here, or pull the plug on the machine that's keeping her mum alive. The thing is, when I was watching this scene, the question that kept running through my mind is, why is this here? What purpose does this have, apart from another fucking excuse for Jodie to cry? Which you could argue this time is justified. But to me, this scene just smells of misery porn. It's here because it's now time to feel the emotions and serves no purpose. It's vapid, it's masturbatory. It might as well have that Pornhub community intro play before the scene. Also, why would Jodie do this? I know that her mum will be sat here catatonic for the rest of her days, but pulling her plug just feels wrong. But like most things in this story, none of it matters. Just like the last few hours of Jodie being AWOL are rendered pointless as she is kidnapped by the CIA to do one last mission. Hooray! And my god, is this thing completely pointless and so stupid. Right, so Jodie is briefed by a new character. Let's call him General Generic, and he is tasking her to go to the fictional land of Kazakhstan, not Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan. Alright, cool. This mission, if she chooses to accept it and she's forced into it because she has no autonomy, great game, is to close another Everworld portal that the filthy communist nation is harboring from the United States, because the CIA play by the fuck you got mine rules of modern warfare. Also, I find it funny that all the military dudes here are Asian, perhaps of Chinese descent. Oh, okay, so a real African country that has had its fair share of trouble is fair game for a shitty stealth level. But a fictional Chinese governed country is too close for comfort, huh? I guess that explains why the PC port came out on the Epic Game Store first. However, once again, and I keep repeating myself here, none of this shit matters. This whole sequence, which is like an hour long, has no bearing on the overall story, and is another example of how this fucking game flows like a compacted bowel. The story at this point feels like David Cage is being paid by the word, so it'll go on these long diatribes that go absolutely nowhere. And then when you go through it, you look back in hindsight and think, what was the point in that? This whole mission screams of this. Yes, it does further the relationship between Jodie and that other asshole I've forgotten the name of already, but their relationship we'll get into later is completely pointless as well. So, I feel like I'm losing my mind. And speaking of a character that looks constipated, this is Nathan. If you don't remember, is played by William Dafoe. And if you've seen any of his films, he's usually typecast as the bad guy, especially later in his career. Like when he scared the shit out of my nephew as the Green Goblin in Spider-Man, and playing a fucking psychopath in one of my favourite films, Antichrist. Jesus. He also played Jesus at one point. Throughout this story, he is the chief scientist in charge of assessing Jodie and Aiden. And over this passage of time, they develop a father-daughter style relationship. Honestly, it's cute, if not a little creepy at the same time. I think it's because of the face. However, halfway through the plot, Jodie starts seeing the ghosts of a woman and a girl, which turns out that these two are Nathan's family, who has just died in a car accident. And it's another power that Jodie has that comes out of nowhere, drink a shot. This is quickly followed by another sequence, where Jodie can channel the ghosts of other people, so they can chat to their loved ones. This moment sets Nathan on a path to the dark side, where he takes over the paranormal division of the CIA, that is studying a massive portal to the infraworld called the Black Sun. Now, you're probably wondering if we are told about this gate before this point. Nope. It's just here now, deal with it. And is another plot device smashing through the wall like a glory hole in a church. While I may rail on it, I do kind of like this idea, which I can't really put my finger on, but I find it kind of cool. And this leads to the reveal that Nathan has been working on a plan to merge the land of the living with the infraworld, so he can be with his family once again. And yes, this deeply emotional story with mature themes has become an episode of the fucking Power Rangers.
You're suffering, Nathan. If you love them, if you really love them, you've got to let them go. You can't cheat death.
Cheat death! Death is nothing! You hear me? Nothing!
You want some brown sauce on that ham? Jeez. And I find it hard to buy that he's in denial about hurting his family. I mean, look at them. If that's not a cry for help, I don't know what is. I wonder if that's a metaphor for the staff at Quantum Dream. Shit, it could be a metaphor for the twats who play this fucking mess. Actually, that could be a metaphor for how I'm feeling reviewing this entire shite-ass series. Well, there's no time to cry, as this is when the shit hits the fan in both writing and story, because Jodie tries to leave the CIA once and for all, but gets knocked out and kidnapped, and then Jodie wakes up to find out she's tied to her bed, with General Generic looking at her like a fucking creep. And just like any Bond villain from the 1960s, he proceeds to tell Jodie his grand plan, and put her in the same chemical-induced coma as her mother. Seriously, the stakes get risen so much in the last hour of this game, even Gordon Ramsay would tell you they're fucking overcooked. Whatever, this scene is used to finally show Nathan's heel turn, and tell Jodie that he's gonna follow through with that garbage idea from earlier. And if you weren't paying attention, the problem with this plan is that the infraworld is not just full of friendly ghosts. It has these evil fish-looking things, as well as other Bloodborne boss rejects that will cause a few problems if let out. And then, unsurprisingly, when Nathan pops the cork, we see the army that is supposed to protect the agents in this secret paranormal facility get absolutely slaughtered. And then it occurred to me, why are they carrying assault rifles? What are they gonna do? Shoot them with ghost bullets? And this is where Jodie decides to chase Nathan down and stop this plan. Pause. Before we go down this path, we need to tie up some loose ends. Chapter 5. Brotherly Love. Remember the part where Jodie was on the run and ends up living rough for a spell? Right, there is one bit where Jodie is busking for food, and she sings a song so well it turns the day to night.
Make it hard to leave you alone, to leave you here, wearing your wounds.
Oh, and the name of this song? Lost Cause. You get it? It's because Jodie's now destitute. She's a lost cause. Fuck me, DC, you have zero self-awareness. And apparently, Elliot Page played this tune on Cage's guitar, and it was all done in one take. Which is cool, I guess. I wish he cracked that fucking thing over his head, but whatever. And if you didn't think this game was a wank mag for nihilists, there is a scene where Jodie is introduced to the 4 horsemen of homeless stereotypes. You have a man whose life crumbled because his partner died. You have the drug addict that picked his illness over the roof over his head. You have the former teacher turned drunkard, who is a nice guy but fell on hard times. And of course, you have the pregnant lady who escaped her abusive partner because David Cage loves broken homes. Shit, Jodie came from a pair of broken homes herself. Yes, she's such a Mary Sue, she has double domestic abuse. Great writing there, Cage. Brilliant. And there isn't a problem that our hero can't fix, because Jodie uses her healing powers to cure these poor bastards. Yes, she can cure all your ills, but can't use her powers to stop the systematic oppression of the working class that is year on year being strangled by rising taxes and diminishing pay, while being brought up in a culture that promotes gross commercialism. Oh, sorry, wrong meeting. That speech is for my comrades down at the docks tonight. Let me find the correct reply. Ah, shit, I know I had it here somewhere. Ah, here it is. Fuck you, David Cage. Speaking of fucking, these segues are fire, let's talk about the multiple men in Jodie's life, especially Aiden and Ryan. Sadly, that Indian boy in the white saviour section is way too generic to talk about, and the actual chemistry was between Jodie and his younger brother. But for some reason she ends up frothing over this chuckle fuck. But even saying that is way too many words to describe this fucking waste of time. Okay, the reason why Ryan is the romantic lead is that he is thrust upon us because he just is. Shut up. And his personality swings from a super macho abusive jarhead to a nice guy fuckboy that just wants to love Jodie to the end of time. Blech. Both of these, as you can imagine, are bad looks. And it doesn't help that this romance is shoved down our throats. While you can repel his advances, because it's optional and it's one of the only things that you can actually make a choice about, the red flag here is perhaps treating her like a piece of meat and putting a gun to her head is a little bit unattractive? Hell, let's be honest, the whole framing of this entire relationship has so many red flags, you could call it the French Revolution. Anyway, after joining the CIA, we are treated to a scene where Jodie and Ryan arrange a date for that evening. And I want to clarify that this date is about 2 years after she joined the CIA. And the reason why I mention this is because Jodie is in her, say, late teens to very early 20s here, and Ryan is in his mid to late 30s, and he is already divorced. And while this isn't illegal, it's a little creepy. And the reason why I highlighted this is because Aiden starts to get a bit narky at the fact that Jodie, who wants to do the horizontal split with her fuckboy, acts like a jealous boyfriend by locking her out and just causing havoc for her. And the relationship between Jodie and Aiden has been a bit of a sassy platonic friendship anyway. It did stick out to me a little. And we also get a shower scene because of course, where we must press X to rub our avatar down with a towel, which is completely necessary, I'm sure. Also, you get to choose what outfit that Jodie gets to wear for her date. So I chose the sexy option. Now, I have no fashion sense, so I don't know if this outfit is indeed sexy, but I have to admit my taste is so twisted, especially after 3 Quantic Dream games in a row. The only outfit that would light my fire right now is a gimp suit made out of David Cage's skin. And, of fucking course, DC's OC gets laid once a fucking again. I don't know why I bother mentioning this, as it's abundantly clear by now that the person who wrote this shit always types with one hand. Also, I want to reiterate that Aiden is watching everything that Jodie is doing, which he can't help because he's tethered to her, he can't escape. However, the following piece of info will drastically change the perception of this entire relationship. You see, Aiden is Jodie's brother. But wait, it gets worse. Oh god, there is a scene when this reveal happens where Jodie has a heart-to-heart with her brother in the spirit world, and for some reason he is bollock naked. And I know he's a ghost and everything, but he could at least cover up the meat and 2 veg. I mean, this whole scene is supposed to be touching, but the distraction of Aiden with his poltergeist pecker hanging out completely ripped me out of this scene. And I know David Cage has no filter or restraint, but I have to ask, how can you fuck up this bad? How can your messages be completely twisted to make your audience see this? Well, let's talk about it. Chapter 6. It's like Forrest Gump, but stupid. While I've made assumptions about this already in the Heavy Rain video, Going Through Beyond, in its intended non-linear format, has hammered home this feeling that Cage writes in his stream of consciousness, and I'll leave this here if you need a primer. Now, writing from a stream of consciousness is not inherently a bad thing. It has been a well-established concept in books for over 100 years, and it's mostly used from a first-person perspective, and tries to emulate the stream of thoughts a person would have, like what they see, what they smell, what they think, blah blah blah, you get the idea. The problem when it comes to how David Cage uses this style for narration is how unfocused he implements plots and subplots, with most of them popping up and disappearing at any given moment. He will come up with a great idea that will be dropped as soon as it's established, or he will have a contentious moment thrown into a scene where the mood contradicts that statement, and that is not including how he handles his characters. And while I've highlighted Jodie and her Mary Sue-ness earlier, there are a ton of times where her character will change on a dime. She will be warm and friendly in one second, and a callous bastard the next. And while I did enjoy the actors and their performances, they are so hindered by this script. And something that really did hit me hard throughout this game. When all these characters come from the same mind, after a while I felt like I'm being browbeaten by David Cage in a skirt, or David Cage the Butch Chad, or David Cage in blackface. They all may be separate characters played by separate actors, but they all talk in the same speech pattern, they all think in the same way, and their morality comes from the same source. It's like the fanfiction version of The Village of the Damned, which could be argued that I'm not separating the art from the artist, and maybe if I remove that parasocial relationship away from him, and maybe I'll enjoy his work more. But as we know by now, David Cage wants you to know that it's him behind this project. There is no escape from his narrative, so trying to apply the death of the author theory to analyse this game doesn't quite work. And with this stream of consciousness also comes a lack of care when it comes to DC's intent with his story. Because, well, Casper the Incestuous Ghost. Need I say more? And once again, I will say this, I don't think David Cage wanted to frame Aiden in this manner, but due to his hubris, or lack of creative control, he managed to push me, the consumer of this message, to come up with this conclusion. And while it's been turned up to a comedic level due to my satirical style, and because I'm making a video, this was my genuine impression. Now, you could argue that this is part of my twisted perception, and if this was an isolated incident, then sure, I see your point. But there is a spanner in the works when it comes to this line of thinking, and we will address that in the next chapter. However, before we get into that, you need to see this shit. When I was doing research for this series, one of the trends I noticed, especially when DC is promoting his games, was this notion that the size of his script for his upcoming project was a big deal. So you would get articles popping up for Heavy Rain or Beyond or Detroit that the following game would have a script that contains 2,000 pages, which, if you look at the number, it's pretty impressive, huh? No, it should be regarded as a fucking meme. You see, in the mind of our favourite author, he thinks that quantity is better than quality, and this 2,000 page script thing is used as a comparison to the average film screenplay, which is around 250 pages long. And you can guess this is dog shit. The reason why I mentioned this script thing, because I found something while diving into this bottomless pit, which hammered this narrative home. In a Facebook post made by video game journalist Dan Ackerman, he received a package from Sony the day after Earth Day, ironically, to celebrate the imminent release of the game. And yes, this is real. 2,000 hole-punched pages to signify the sheer girth of this deeply personal and very mature story. But the punchline is, all these pieces of paper are fucking blank. What a weird and very wasteful flex. But wait, there's more. This Insult the Trees was an announcement of Beyond 2-Ply being selected for the Tribeca Film Festival. I guess this nearly decade-long grift finally bore fruit. Or Cage has some compromising photos of the selection committee. No idea. But hey, look on the bright side. And not that fucking awful channel, I mean disposition. At least Dan has plenty of toilet paper. While I've enjoyed clowning on the dumb stuff and trying to follow a story that was written in fucking crayon, now we have to go into a part of the game where this car crash writing style goes from frustrating yet comical into something potentially harmful. Chapter 7. Messages. To break character for a second, when I started the review of this series, my initial take of David Cage and Quantic Dream's output was pretty but pulpy trash. Nothing to be taken seriously, you know, that sort of shit. And while you could extract some triggering content to cancel, you know, the measured response when it comes to online discourse, if I knew ahead of time that the themes we were about to talk about in this game, honestly the series might not have happened. But now that we are here, we gotta talk about some stuff that is quite uncomfortable. Okay, to catch up with Jodie, she makes her way to the Black Sun and confronts Nathan, who in turn pulls a gun on her. Jodie, knowing that Nathan is in a great deal of pain due to his family passing away, manages to talk sense into him, and he relents and puts the gun down, to then turn the gun on himself and pulls the trigger. While this is a shocking turn of events, and I can empathise with his grief, and I can also see why he would do such a thing. I may not personally agree with his outcome, but I get it. The thing is, once he takes his life, Nathan is instantly rewarded with the loving embrace of his family, and this somber yet uplifting music begins to play, and then the camera pans to Jodie, and she is smiling. And then Nathan, after finally being reunited with his family, vanishes into the ether. Now, I'm not sure how you would react to this sequence. My impression of this scene felt like it was an endorsement of suicide, and this sad and difficult moment is treated as a triumphant display. The family are not shocked that Nathan took his life in this manner. They just hug him without question. Everything is good, and he got what he wanted. There is no deeper meaning, no storytelling, and it just feels like another empty display of sadness that is here for the uncultured swines to react accordingly. Sorry, I'm getting a little angry here. This is very, very gross. And I get the intent that Nathan is supposed to be a well-meaning man that happens to fall to this darkness brought on by his grief, and that is relatable. The problem is, the reason why I barely talked about him in this video is because within the context of this story, and within the growth of Jodie as a character, he doesn't matter. While he interacts with our lead throughout the story, there is no meaningful connection between him and Jodie. So when she shows no love towards him once he dies, it is treated like a throwaway moment. Yes, he is supposed to be the father figure for Jodie, but no care was given by Cage in establishing their relationship, and most of their interactions were exposition dumps. And once he dies and goes away, Jodie acts like she never knew him at all. He's just another stepping stone to her main goal. It's a really weird disconnect that pulled me out of the experience. So the shock of Nathan pulling the trigger on himself feels like another poor attempt at drama, and is a flagrant tone-deaf approach to suicide, which you can imagine is very irresponsible. But this isn't the only moment where this game has this glorification of death and self-harm. Swinging back to the homeless section again, if you explore the area you will find a knife stuck in a tyre, and without any prior warning, you are given the option to cut Jodie's wrists, or you have another option to jump off the balcony. Now, in a game that touts itself as a mature story, where our choices matter, who would do this? What is the outcome if you do it? And why is this a thing in the first place? Because when it comes to games, for the most part, we don't want them to come to harm. So given the option out the blue to do harm to Jodie feels weird and goes against every instinct you ever had playing a video game. And also, when it comes to jumping off this balcony, if you do decide to jump, Aiden saves her. And then all she does is complain about life on the run and the predicament she put herself in the first place. And once again, this bleeds into her character because she is invincible. So why would she do this? Which doesn't help with our homeless friend here. Instead of rushing to her aid and talking to her like a human being, a girl who almost jumped to her death in front of him and now is having an emotional breakdown, he just says, yeah, that's okay, let's go grab some pork and beans. Maybe it will cheer you up. And it's just another massive disconnect. Once again, this whole scene was made for hollow emotional manipulation, and it's implemented so casually. It gives me the impression that the writer either thought it was an acceptable plot device or didn't care about these traumatic events and the victims of these acts. And the way these options are just given to you out of the blue makes my skin crawl. It's almost insidious in its execution. The same can be said with the actual ending, where Jodie can either choose life or choose to die, and be rewarded with, you know what, just watch this.
There's a world out here. A whole universe of forests and lakes and mountains and rivers. It's all around us. You just have to listen carefully to hear its whisper. Neither heaven nor hell. There's no God or devil. Just a place where we continue to exist after we die. My soul explores it endlessly, and I've still only seen a fragment of it.
Isn't it funny that David Cage's version of the afterlife is so indecisive? But that doesn't take away that once again, this is a glorification of death that contradicts everything we know of Jodie as a character. If she was so hell-bent on killing herself, why show all of this hard living throughout the whole game? You know, beating up hundreds of dudes, defying death, saving people. It doesn't add up. Also in this bit, you get to meet up with all the side characters that can die throughout the game, which is okay, cool. But once again, and I keep saying this and I do apologise, none of this matters, as they have no bearing on the narrative, and the only reason why you would frag them is to get a fucking PlayStation trophy. Yeah, hey, good job Tommy Titwank69, here's a lump of silver to shove up your ass. What the fuck? Sadly, the optics of this entire story go from bad to incredibly difficult to talk about, and this is where our good pal David violates one of the biggest rules in writing, and that is, if you can use anything but rape as a plot device, don't use rape. I don't think I need to say this, but sexual assault is one of those sensitive topics that is complex and painful for the people who have experienced it, and Cage is not prepared to talk about this nuanced topic, and it shows, as it's just another example of his provocative use of themes that are used as another hurdle for Jodie to overcome. Also, it's kind of pathetic that he thinks this is acceptable to talk about, full stop. And what makes this sequence irredeemable in my eyes is that it's optional. However, the game does not tell you this. There is a scene in the middle of this game where Jodie wants to meet some friends at a local bar, and it turns out her buddies are running late, so she decides to sit down and wait for them to show up. The bartender comes over and gives Jodie a drink, and at this point you can stand up and walk right out the front door and skip this scene entirely. Where this sequence becomes hard to experience is that all the foreshadowing of something that is about to happen is here, but the structure and execution are like the rest of this game. Sloppy. There are no prompts to tell the player they have the freedom to leave, and also that you have Aiden here to help, who you can use to eavesdrop on the men at the bar. And if you do this, then you know right away there's a bad vibe here. But you might be under the impression that he is currently away from Jodie, as she used him in an earlier scene to mind trick a character called Cole to sneak out of the lab and go to this bar. And on the way to this said bar, she sends him off into the forest. Even with the established mechanic early on that Aiden can't be too far away from Jodie for very long because it causes her harm, there are no side effects here to denote to the player that he is here to help in this scene. So if you don't pick up on this fact, then you might be caught unaware. So yes, the game and its creators have failed to do their jobs and inform the player of what is about to happen. And when the incident happens, there is a sharp cutaway from Jodie, and Aiden then swoops in to defend her by brutally murdering these creeps. Which is, yeah, okay, fair enough, these guys are assholes and he deserve to die. And while you don't see anything untoward, the implication is enough to know that this is in very bad taste. Once again, David Cage does not want to go any deeper into this, which to me is a huge misunderstanding of the situation at hand and a frankly disgusting and cowardly use of extremely sensitive subjects to push his narrative forward. This is like shitty writer trope 101, and what further compounds this twisted messaging is that the game on a mechanical level post this scene will punish the player by locking out trophies and sizable chunks of content. Arguably, this incident that isn't your fault is the biggest fail state in this entire game. Now, I know I keep repeating myself, but what does that say? What is the message here? That victims of sexual assault can no longer find happiness? That people through appropriate means of healing can't progress in life? It leads a lot of questions here that are never filled in or never attempted to answer. While I don't think this was the intended meaning, and I hope that Cage has a shred of decency and didn't go into this with the purpose of expressing this message, but it doesn't excuse his blatant use of deeply hurtful situations as a character device, and is a dullard to spring this onto an unsuspecting player base that may have been affected by this violent act in real life. This isn't like chainsawing aliens on a galaxy far, far away. Topics such as this cause deep wounds that can affect the victims and their loved ones for a very long time. And for Cage to charge in and use this as a shallow attempt to get you to connect with his character is fucking disgusting. So yeah, it's easy to see that this is a bad look for all involved, and I don't want to dwell on this any further. So out of respect to the people who may have been affected by this, I think we should move on. Chapter 8, Tone Deaf.
Where do you get, this is the story of a 15 years of a girl. I mean, where do you sort of get your material from to get into her head? Because obviously you're not a 15-year-old girl yourself.
Well,
apparently.
When you write, you put a lot of yourself in, of course, in the characters that you describe. For me, in my career as a writer, there was a big turning point. It was probably Heavy Rain. It was the first game on which I discovered that I could write something about me and my experience and my feelings rather than talking about, aliens and monsters and other planets. I could just talk about people and in real life and their emotions and things that I experienced myself. So Heavy Rain was really about my experience being a young father. Beyond as another experience that was more painful. It's I lost someone I felt really close to in my family, and it was the first time I was confronted with death in such a way, and it's something very brutal, and all people who've been confronted with death know what I'm talking about. It's something really brutal, really sudden, and 1 second the person is there and she has feelings and emotion and memories and all that stuff that you share. And from 1 second to another, all this is gone. And there's nothing left. And it's always weird, and you can't help thinking, where is this person now? Where are these feelings? Where are these emotions? Where are these memories now? And as I never trusted exactly what religion had to say about death and what's on the other side, I just tried to make up my own idea, my own vision of what happens after we die.
While I agree that David Cage was coming from a personal perspective when he approached the story, And look, I believe the best fiction comes from a shred of truth. The biggest problem with this whole story is the writer himself. Even with a stripped back cast and this focus on having an action-packed story with an emotional edge, it's still, just like the rest of his back catalogue, vapid and unfocused. The usual start, middle and end structure is replaced by a non-linear setup that is messy and incomprehensible, with arcs that go nowhere or used to get a cheap emotional heat. The cast, while great performers in their own right, are underutilised and come off as another maypole to advertise this game. And the real shit that DC wants to hit us with is gutless and buried under so many conflicting tones that when it's time to get real, it often comes up as another baseless complaint, rather than something that he is passionate in talking about, or mishandled in such a way that the original intent is lost. The one aspect that kinda shocked me while researching this game was the culture and the consensus of the people who played it, especially when it first launched back in 2013. Usually at this point in the video, I would say that cop-out line that, if you like this game then all the power to you. But this time, I had to know why. So I went onto the website where lateral thought is a sin, Metacritic, and I was shocked to see that people loved this game. However, this 10 out of 10 review made by Aussie One, whatever, made me laugh at this opening line.
Simply put, not a game for the masses. I would hope everyone out there would be touched by its message. But, as a senior player, I know better.
A senior player. A player that is senior.
My brain hurts!
And while it would be fun to riff on these diatribes, I think the comment left on my Fahrenheit video by the user called Cheeky Panda, nice, pretty much hit the nail on the head, because if we compare the scores with the PS4 and PC releases that came out 5 years later, you can tell that the people who were ride or die for this game back in the day seem to have moved on since then. And honestly, most of the comments I saw, especially at that time, were people thirsting over Elliot Page. And I wonder if those people are still in that mindset in light of recent news. And I think that sums up Beyond Tone Deaf nicely. It was a story that may have had good intentions at the start, with the budget to present it in a visually attractive way, is held back by David Cage's aggressive incompetence to tell a story that makes any kind of sense, and it's bogged down by its mind-numbing length, with scenes and set pieces that go nowhere, with moments where delicate topics are even glossed over or framed to be a tasteless display. So, the final question in this video that needs addressing is, what narrative has David Cage done to make his games more mature, to be taken seriously as an art form, and to explore adult-oriented themes progressively? Fuck if I know. All he did in his 11-hour diatribe is further expose himself as a baseless provocateur, with a cast he probably blackmailed to be in this mess. Nothing profound or engaging was said, and the messages I did pick up, I want to banish from my memory as soon as possible. And what makes this even more cynical, this is being pushed by one of the biggest tech corporations, which only cares for profits over quality products. Even after buying this game from a shady key site, because the enemy of my enemy is also a rip-off merchant, I feel dirty playing this game. And I feel dirty for spending money on this shit, even with the smug posturing of not lining DC's greasy mitts. With that said, if I gave numeric ratings for games I reviewed to reflect my overall enjoyment level, and taking into account the toothpicks of things I did like, this would be the first 0 out of 10 in nearly a decade of reviewing games as a hobby. I have never seen something this inept. And in the last video, I know I labelled Heavy Rain as the worst game I've ever played. I was too naive. I was too presumptuous. On reflection, Heavy Rain is a fucking masterpiece in comparison. While it did suffer from sloppy writing that didn't go anywhere for most of its runtime, it had charm. It had a decent presentation and it had a vision. With Beyond Two Souls, the game itself is just a large gelatinous grey cube of bland platitudes and pseudo-deep crap that wanted to push the narrative design of the medium, but ironically may have stalled any progress that was made before its release, especially in the mainstream. For a title that promises to be a saviour of storytelling in games, it pales in comparison to examples that came out a decade before, on less powerful tech. And the worst thing is, the further I move away from this, the less I remember. It's like my brain is doing everything it can to erase this junk from my noggin. And to let you in on a secret, this fucking script took nearly a month to write, because every time I went back and watched clips just to refresh my memory, I found more stuff I had to pull apart. This whole game is like a piñata of terrible ideas. That is why Beyond Two Souls gets a big, fat goose egg. It has no right to exist, and it's baffling that people think that this cancer encoding form has any right to your financial or emotional investment. And its messages that are here, not because of authorial intent, but by accident, is a testament to a writer and his hack approach to everything. I know this is cliche to say, but this is one of the worst stories in gaming. No, fuck that shit. It's one of the worst in all of fiction. And I find it so ironic that David Cage wants his stories to be mature, but he chooses to write these concepts in such a juvenile manner. It's all melodrama, it's masturbatory, and the use of miserable events to make you relate to his characters that have no character, or act in a way that could have been easily avoided if the creators around this project gave a shit about the subtleties, which they don't. And while I felt for the team that works with Cage to produce this shit, the further I went into this abysmal abyss, my empathy for them quickly diminished. Is David Cage that much of a tyrant that none of his peers turn around to him and say no when he comes up with a really fucking dumb idea? If that is the case, I urge you to get out, because that environment will produce nothing that's worth a damn. Especially with a creator at the center of this team who thinks he is creating high art, but makes content that puts YouTube Red movies to shame. And to the industry shills and players and influencers who put out reviews endorsing this shit, are just as complacent. The bottom line here is David Cage is a bad and thoughtless writer who tries to wriggle off the hook by saying that his stories have no outward thoughtful messages that the player should take seriously in his games, while saying that his stories are trying to push the envelope in mature storytelling and should resonate with people who play it, while not grasping the fact that this stance is a convoluted conundrum that he made himself and is too stupid to write himself out of it. So, from my perspective, he should just give up.